Hello and welcome to another video, and first of all thank you so much. I've got 3,000 subscribers, so it's a big achievement for me in this channel. Didn't think I was going to get that far, and I think apparently now YouTube thinks it can take me another year or 2 years to get 5,000 subscribers, so let's try and prove them wrong. Right, today we are looking at Spring Hill Jack, and this is a figure or phantom or maybe a human being that terrorized London and apparently across the rest of the country in 1837 when it started, right the way up till, well, actually there's some modern reports of Spring Hill Jack even today, so have a look at that. Anyway, let's get into it. So this is a bit of a passion project for me, this one, something I've been interested in years, so bear with me on it. I quite like it. Just let me know your thoughts when we get to the end of it. So London in the 1830s was a bit of a strange place. Over a few years there have been some reports of ghosts and strange figures creeping around. Now this is obviously before the time of Jack the Ripper, but there's some Hammersmith ghost stuff that had gone on, and yeah, some pretty weird stuff. In October 1837 is the first official report we have of Spring Hill Jack. So on a really dark and foggy evening in October 1837, Mary Stevens was walking home and she was coming up to Lavender Hill. As she arrived there, she noticed a man standing on the corner, and it sort of creeped her out a little bit, and she was walking along. He turned and then jumped and grabbed hold of her. What she describes is, well, what she did describe was something horrific. That this gentleman or thing had green metal fingers, his skin was cold and clammy, he attacked her, started ripping at her clothes and pulling her hair, but only then proceeded to kiss her repeatedly before pushing her aside and fleeing and jumping over a small wall. In her reports to the police, she describes him as tall, thin, wearing a black cloak and a helmet or horns on his head and red eyes, plus the metal fingers. We don't have any reports of the blue or white flames that people say he spat, so on this one we're just looking at this. But you got to remember, this was, you know, the dark streets of London, it was foggy, and as I say, at that period of time there's some strange stuff going on in London, and the police didn't really know what to make of this. But then a day later, a coachman was riding his coach down the road when a dark figure jumped out in front of him and tried to attack the coach. He lost control and crashed it and got severely injured. But the people on board were started being attacked by this figure. As they got out and started to chase him, he was said to have jumped a 9-foot wall in a single bound. Now this sounds like a bit of a superhuman superhero, which is quite apt when we'll come to that a bit later on. But yes, there is links with sort of supernatural or superhuman strength, I should say, in modern, well, entertainment, let's put it that way. When the coachman was interviewed, he turned around and said that this figure had bright red eyes and they were glowing. And again, the same sort of reports of either a helmet or horns on his head and a cloak. So we are getting similar reports, so the police obviously knew this was the same person that they were looking for. Over the next few months, well, quite a lot of reports come across, and what they were saying was quite bizarre. This figure had been seen jumping across the rooftops in London, climbing and jumping massive gaps in a single leap. So a lot of people were getting very, very scared of this. These reports, as I say, kept growing and growing and growing. By Christmas 1837, the reports had mounted up quite a lot. Around about January the 2nd, a lady called Polly Adams was walking across Blackheath when she was attacked. And as she describes the red eyes, the cloak, the fingers, but this time he tried to grab hold of her and run off with her. But lucky enough, she was able to struggle free and made her get away, while he ran across the common. This sort of pushed the authorities into a corner, and people started to demand answers. And on the 9th of January, the Lord Mayor came out with a statement. He turned around and said that he had received a letter that claimed that some high society people had made a wager that they would scare 3 people in 3 different locations across the area and in 3 different outfits: an oilskin, a cloak and a bearskin. Now, so far, the only one that sort of matched up with that was the oilskin. In the police reports, Polly Adams claimed that the attacker was wearing an oilskin, which I think now that's like the old skydiving, the old scuba diving wetsuits, aren't they? I think that's what they're on about. But I have seen reports that people sometimes said that it could have been a butcher's coat or a leather apron. That same sort of smooth feeling. Now, in this letter to the Lord Mayor, as I say, it stated that this was for a bet, a wager, and they're taking this up. But also, because they were high society, they were only going to attack people of a lower class. So I think that was put out there to stop the higher class society people worrying. And you got to remember, back then, the class system was very, very different. Some people argue the same as now, but that literally people did not care about the lower class. And as long as the higher class were comfortable and felt safe, that's all that mattered in that system at that time. But reports didn't stop coming in. We had some in Stockwell, Brixton, Camberwell and Vauxhall. All had reports. Some of these reports said that people actually died of fright. And this is when, again, the first report of the blue flame really started coming out. That people died of fright by a blue flame that came out of his mouth. This may link to something that could be an explanation a little bit later on. On the 28th of February 1838, Jane Alsop, who was a servant girl, was working in the house when there was a knock on the door. Now, at the time, reports of Spring Hill Jack were rife, and they knew that people were out hunting him. She opened the door and there was a policeman standing there, and he was covered in a cape. He said, quick, quick, we've caught Spring Hill Jack, bring me a light. She rushed off and come back with a candle. As she got back to the policeman, he threw the cloak down to reveal that it was Spring Hill Jack, and he tried to attack her. She described him as wearing a oilskin, again the same sort of thing with her before, a helmet or horns, and bright red eyes that were like fireballs. He spat blue flame out of his mouth. He then grabbed her with metal claws and started ripping at her clothing. She was able to get away and shouted out, and people came running. They chased him down the street and he was able to jump up and again escape by going from rooftop to rooftop. Something interesting, actually two things interesting here. One, we have no reports of what happened to the cape that he threw off on the floor, because he certainly never come back for it, and there's no reports of him actually picking it up and leaving with it. And the other one is this blue flame. The reports state that it smelt like sulphur, and that is something that again could link back to people in high society. If this was a hoax, then people of, I guess, sort of financial backing would have access to these sort of chemicals, because it takes a certain mix to get this to come out in a blue flame in a liquid form that you could pipe up and throw out. Now, Jane actually turned around and said that he vomited blue flame, which does make it sound as if it was coming from his mouth, or could have been a pipe next to his mouth to scare her. Again, this is a little bit conjecture. We don't know, say, the reports of this actually. There's loads of police reports about Spring Hill Jack, but they were all kept in the museum, and the museum got bombed during World War II, and all that got lost. So we don't have the original documents. And this sort of links into something that's always puzzled me over the years. So in about 1985, I used to go down to the allotment with my granddad, and he would tell me a poem, and it was about Spring Hill Jack. Doing this research, and over the last few years, I've been trying to find this poem that my granddad told me. The only ones that come up are modern poems that have been literally written since 2000. I can't find any of these poems that my granddad sung to me. Now this back in 1985. That, I remember him telling me that poem used to come from his nan. Now, going by the age, my nan, my great nan, would have been around in sort of like 1850. Around the time of, well, shortly after these first instances, but there's more to come where she would have been around during that time. And I say the last official report of Spring Hill Jack was around about 1909. So we've got quite a long period to go. I remember going back after my granddad telling me these stories and going into my English class and telling my English teacher, Mrs. McFarland at the time, this poem. And she turned around and said, Spring Hill Jack, we've got a story about him in the box at the back of the room. Now, in my English class, there's a big box at the back and it had things like little cards that would lead to another little book, and it'd be like, what ones do we used to have in there? Dana Triffids, Hans of Baskerville, and a book on Spring Hill Jack. And I remember reading this book, and in this book there's a story that I've not seen in any of the research that I have done. And over the years I've referred to this story and told people about it when they've asked me about Spring Hill Jack or anything like that, because it's the one that I knew the most because I heard it as a child and it stuck with me. So in 1850, a group of people were leaving a pub in London in the East End. Now this happened to be right by Limehouse. As they was leaving, a figure jumped down from the rooftops. They describe him exactly like Spring Hill Jack, a cap or a helmet with horns on his head. They had long metal fingers and they described them as green fingers. He was spitting blue flame. He had eyes that like fireballs that lit up. He grabbed a girl and then jumped up the wall and up onto the rooftops with this girl. And he ran across the rooftops holding this girl as he jumped across each rooftop. What I find weird is that if you look up Spring Hill Jack on the internet, and I'll try and put up some of these pictures now, in one of them he is depicted of holding somebody in his arms as he's fleeing the scene. I can't see in any of the reports that I found today where he's said to capture somebody, but it matches the story that I know. And these drawings are from that time period that appeared in the newspapers, in the Penny Dreadfuls. So the Penny Dreadfuls used to be all these sort of like little spooky stories that used to go out, and everyone used to love reading them. And I'm not sure if that's the picture from that or it was in the newspaper, but it shows him grabbing somebody. And that is the only evidence that I can find that he ever did grab anybody, and that was from the story that was in back my old English class. But if you know of a poem that was written back in the 1800s that matches sort of Spring Hill Jack, let me know, because I can't remember the poem now, but I know it does say something about jumping the walls and roof to roof, saying about dark and foggy night. And I say, I've looked up, I've even used AI to try and find it, not been able to find it at all, and it's quite frustrating. But also, if you know any other stories of Spring Hill Jack where he's said to grab somebody and jump over the rooftops with them, also comment below for me, because I don't think I'm going mad, but I do remember this story at school because it's something that I used to tell. Anyway, moving on from that, we go to 9 days after Jane's attack and we go to Lucy Scales. Now, Lucy Scales is walking home from work. This is in Green Dragon Alley in Limehouse. Again, so this matches up where the location was for the attack that I knew of. And actually, just thinking about that, in the attack that I know of, he was said to go from Limehouse to Whitechapel by jumping the roofs, and that is quite possible. So in this one, where Lucy is attacked, this is right by Limehouse Basin, and you can actually go to the site of Green Dragon Alley now. It's not there, but there is like a platform where you can walk along next to the quays and you can see where it was, sort of thing. I'll stick a map up here and you'll be able to sort of line it up, but you can actually go and walk along that bit. I was going to take a trip down there, but you know what, all those little narrow passages are all gone, it's all modern, and it just doesn't feel right trying to base a story, to base history in a place that is so changed now. I know I've done that in the past, but yeah, for this one, I think keeping in your mind that dark, foggy London is the better setting for this. And one of these things that plays into that, of course, is that these were gaslit. The lights in London at the time were still gaslit. So someone would come along and light it with a lighter. So the light wasn't very bright, so it was all quite dimly lit. Saying that, if you go outside now, I know in Thurrock, and we've got these LED lights, and they don't seem to light up anything, do they? It's like a floodlit underneath the spot where the light is, but that is it. Did you know this? They can change the power of that. Councils can actually reduce and increase the power of how bright those LED lights are. Didn't know that. Something I did find out. So yeah, ask your local council to turn the power up on those street lights so we can actually see where we go during the evening. Going back to Lucy. So Lucy describes her attacker as having flame eyes and again breathing blue flames. Now, Lucy says she became very ill after being attacked by this figure, by Spring Hill Jack. And she described the smell of sulphur, made her so poorly that she actually spent a long time in bed trying to recover. Now, if you remember earlier on, I turned around and said that in like Vauxhall and that area, people were made to have been scared to death and died, lost their lives. Is this because they were poisoned by something that is in this flame? If we jump out of the paranormal spooky side, what about if the odour or the chemicals in this flame that they were using were so toxic that it was actually killing people? Now again, you'd think that Spring Hill Jack himself would suffer from that, but if he's wearing a helmet and some sort of gear up, he's probably got a mask on to protect him. Are people almost suffocating from inhaling so much sulphur? I guess today we'll be able to test for that. But that's all breaking the paranormal spooky side of him, of what Spring Hill Jack could be. When Jane Alsop was attacked, she described something that may give us a hint to the identity of this person. She said that this had an embroidered W on his shirt once he dropped the cape. That embroidered W apparently was linked back to the Marquess of Waterford. Now, he was a young Marquess who was up to no good a lot and had quite a bad reputation, and he was brought in for questioning, but during the time he was being questioned, other attacks carried on, so they sort of ruled him out. But a lot of people did point the finger at him. It would fall into that category of a wager of people in higher society that were picking on the lower class. So I can guess that is why these sort of things happen. But this went on for a long time. Even from 1850 up to 1890, these events and reports of Spring Hill Jack were reported all across the country. So we've got reports in Aldershot, we've got reports in Liverpool, we've got reports in the Midlands, and the Midlands have their own sort of theories on Spring Hill Jack. So in 1890 in Dudley, a load of people were reporting sightings of a demon, and this demon would be seen jumping across the canals, and people were getting quite scared of this. So a group of them got together and went hunting for this demon. How they described him was a tall, slender figure with one eye that could leap over these canals and then run off down the road. One evening they went out after some locals reported seeing this figure, and they managed to track him down. As they looked up by the canals, they could see this figure jumping over the canals backwards and forwards with one eye, one bright eye. They slowly approached him, they pounced and was able to grab him and bring him down to the floor. This turned out to be Joseph Darby, a world champion at the standing jump, and he was actually out there training with a miner's lamp on his head, so one light to guide his way as he trained jumping across the canals to try and beat the world record. And I just think that's brilliant. It's just a typical thing. I can imagine people doing that today. If these sort of myths and all that would go around today, yeah, that would happen, wouldn't it? That really would happen. Being accused of just doing something. But yeah, but this is again the mass hysteria. You got to remember, back then these reports were continuous. From 1837 up to 1890, these reports were coming in all over the country. And it's bizarre. So our last report was actually in Everton, Liverpool, and that is in 1909. I'll check. Okay, I checked. It was 1888 and 1904 were the reports in Liverpool, but we have reports in 1877 in Lincolnshire. We also have reports in Sheffield, Aldershot in 1879 and 1878. Now this was by Lord Ernest Hamilton. Now Lord Ernest Hamilton, he was in a barracks in Aldershot when they, as a group, see this Spring Hill Jack jumping across the rooftops in Aldershot. They gave chase, but they lost him. But then they moved barracks to Colchester, which I guess is still far from me, but you know, it's Essex. And he was seen outside the barracks in Colchester jumping across the rooftops heading towards the castle. This sort of, again, I'm a little bit suspicious. Now, Lord Ernest Hamilton was seen in great respect. You know, he had high regard within people, but he see this twice, but most people only ever see this once. And it happened quite a distance between. Aldershot and Colchester is a massive gap. I'm not doubting him, or, well, I am doubting him. Yeah, you're a liar. But yeah, I think out of all these reports, Lord Ernest Hamilton is the one that's most likely made up. I don't know why he would do it, but from 1837 to 1887 is a big gap. Being in that high regard, yeah, I don't know. Sitting around making stories of a night time. No, they had no entertainment, did they? We keep saying this. Back in those days, there was no entertainment. You had to make up your own entertainment, and telling stories was one of them. So what about Spring Hill Jack in the modern era? Well, I guess you can say the last report was during World War II, and that was in Berlin. It turns out Spring Hill Jack had spread his wings and was starting to be seen across Europe. Now there's been reports in Prague, in Austria and in Switzerland of a figure that is very much like Spring Hill Jack. People do link in with things like the Mothman. Now if you remember, the Mothman is a figure that is seen before disaster. Now there was no particular disasters that happened directly after this sort of time period, although in London, I guess you can say in those streets we do have, you know, Whitechapel, where Jack the Ripper was going off, and the Ghost of Hammersmith. People have asked me to cover the Ghost of Hammersmith. I may do. No, I won't. So the Ghost of Hammersmith, apparently there's a ghost kept being seen going down the street scaring people, and one evening they went out and they shot the ghost. And it turns out to be a butcher coming home from work. It weren't the ghost. But this was sort of that mass hysteria that was going around that time. People truly were addicted to paranormal stories back then. It was their entertainment. Anything that they couldn't explain was a ghost, or a phantom, a demon, the devil. It coming to its own little creation. Talking of creations, we have Batman. What's Batman got to do with Spring Hill Jack? Apparently everything. Apparently Batman is based on Spring Hill Jack. Now some of the early illustrations of Spring Hill Jack have his cloak as almost like a bat wing and a black cap with these horns on it, make him look like Batman. Jumping across the rooftops and escaping is something that you'd expect from Batman as well. And the superhuman superpower of Batman. So how many times can I say Batman in this? Batman. But yeah, so, and I think it's sort of been confirmed as well. I haven't dug too much into this little bit, but I understand there's some firm evidence that the illustrations of Batman the illustrations of Spring Hill Jack did inspire Batman. So yeah, you learn something new every day, didn't you? Because I didn't know that before this. I do want to add one thing to this. Now in October 1990 in London, and this was around the East End of London, the housing estates. A figure was seen jumping from rooftop to rooftop. And quite ironically, I was going to wear that t-shirt. I have a Storer t-shirt, and they are parkour experts, and probably the best in the world for parkour, or definitely made it up the level of what parkour is, and the videos of parkour anyway. And they jump from rooftops to rooftops. In fact, their biggest one was Rooftops Asia, where they're jumping over the skyscrapers all around Asia, and massive gaps. I think the reports in 1990 of this figure jumping from rooftops to rooftops in London was actually an early form of parkour, and it has been around for years, of free movement running and all this sort of stuff. But this figure was said to have jumped a massive gap around about a 20-foot space, and that is quite extreme. So yeah, but the police were called, and the police tried to track this figure down, and they never did. And then we have another report in 1995 of a very, very similar thing. Again, the police gave chase, and this black figure in a cloak was chased around the Limehouse modern developments with no success. Now, the police put it down to a burglar, someone trying to break into some of the buildings. Other people that have done the research believe that Springle Jack is still around today, and he still hunts around Limehouse and Whitechapel area and around the Docklands. I was hoping to do a video on the Docklands. I will get that one done soon. I don't know when that will be. But again, thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for commenting. And yeah, hopefully the channel's going to grow, and it will give me more access to go out and do other videos that I really want to do. There's some places I really want to go, and use liking, subscribing and watching these videos are helping me do that. And so again, thank you, and look after yourselves, and see you next video. Bye.